Welcome to the Ketogenic Diet Show. My name is Mary Beauchamp, and I'll be your hostess. Let's begin by taking a deep breath together. Take a moment to bring your awareness system into your body and into the present moment. Listen deeply to what your body has to say, because your body has all of the answers, and it's your job to tune in and listen. Your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, and your actions are all instructing your immune system. In this podcast, I'll be exploring the history of human evolution, cultural anthropology, food systems, and the scientific literature, looking at patterns that can give us great insight into how we can live our lives today in a more aligned, integrated, and sustainable way. Here, I attempt to bridge the gap between the science and spirituality of self-healing. This is a process that requires deep self-reflection, which can lead to self-empowerment. My mission is to help as many people as I can to connect with their inner guidance system so that they can make truly informed decisions about their health. And in that process, they can awaken their body's innate intelligence to heal and thrive. When your mind and body are aligned, you are the boss of your emotional and physical health. Taking control of your health is a spiritual journey that requires you to look at what you eat, as well as what is eating you. And when you do this, you can take the prescription pen out of your doctor's hand and write your own ticket to wellness. So now that you're fully present in your body, sit back, relax, and enjoy this information. See how it speaks to your body. Feel in and see how your body receives it. When the truth reveals itself to you, it will resonate in your body and you will know it. Then you can act accordingly based on the information you receive. It is totally possible to give your body messages that will consciously relay information to your biochemistry that can support your health and happiness. Today is a very special day because I am interviewing my amazing daughter, Stella Beauchamp. Stella is a medical herbalist, permaculturist, and Thai massage therapist. She's trained in ancient traditions of Unani Tib medicine, which roots back to ancient Greek medicine, Hippocrates, and Galen. Her education was centered on the belief that humans possess a force of life within them to heal and recover from illness and disease. In her work, she uses medicinal herbs. She gives thanks and offerings to nature as the primary source of vitality. She believes that nature provides all of the tools to heal our bodies and live our best life free of pharmaceuticals. Stella spends most of her time building her homestead, an off-the-grid straw bale house, and transforming her land into a permaculture food forest. She also loves growing herbs for her herbal apothecary. Stella consults people on how to restore their connection to nature and live in harmony with the earth. She has been trained in many regenerative practices, including permaculture, landscaping, and organic farming. She's passionate about creating vital ecosystems where life can flourish, putting her hands in the dirt, and building a strong microbiome through connecting to the vital forces of nature and cultivating richness and abundance in her environments and in her body. I'd like to give a warm welcome to Stella. I'm super excited to have you on today and have you share with everyone just a little bit about your journey and how you got into what you're doing and what is it that you've been up to in the last couple of years. Lots of learning and really cool stuff. So I want you to share a little bit about just kind of what led you to this point in your life.
Yeah. Well, growing up, I was raised on a pretty healthy diet, I would say. And as a young child, I would remember it being kind of difficult and irritating. But as I grew older and into college and started realizing how much my health affects my mentality and my physical body, I knew that I wanted to study something that had to do with the earth and with health and with our connection to ourselves and how we can live the most grounded and healthy life that we can. So I did 1 year of college and didn't find that education avenue was going to lead me to where I wanted to go. So I dropped out of college and I started to take herbal courses with a school up in Nevada City here locally. And I did all the courses that was offered through that school and started seeing some of my own clients and making my own medicine. And at the beginning of herbalism school, I had the thought that I would do herbalist school and then go to massage school. And it just so happened that my life kind of organized in that way. And so last fall, I went to Spirit Winds School of Thai Massage and started seeing clients pretty immediately. Now I'm kind of blending the two disciplines. So I make my own herbal pain relieving salve and different topical tinctures that I use in my massage practice, kind of blending the two to relieve pain and give a sense of relaxation, and really working with sacred feminine energies with Thai massage because it is a matrilineal art and it's been passed down through women. So being able to hold a space and have that be nurturing and soft and kind of breaking down the barriers that we have physically and emotionally to our own healing. Of recently, I've been doing a lot of massage, making a lot of medicine for some local stores here that I've been selling, which has been really fun just to be creative in the kitchen and make up new formulas to share with people.
You have puppies.
I have puppies. You might hear some yapping and yipping in the background because I have 3 puppies at home.
Okay, so we might hear a little yapping in the background. That's all right. I would just love for you to share with people sort of what happened to you emotionally, energetically, when you went to college, because we all imagine that our kids are going to go to college and do that whole thing. And it just doesn't fit for some people and it doesn't work. There's nothing you can do to make yourself fit into that mold if it's not right for you. So I just appreciate the way in which you explored it and you really gave it your all. And I remember so vividly the turmoil that the environment caused you.
Yeah. So first, before I even went to college, we were trying to hash out the whole food meal plan situation. It was a situation where I could not cook for myself unless I had a diagnosis that proved that I could not eat the food in their cafeteria. And so, luckily, there was a naturopathic doctor who wrote a note saying that I have celiac disease, and that was enough. But still, it took the whole entire year that I was there to actually make that happen. Meanwhile, I was cooking all of my meals on my own. I mean, that was a big slice of the pie. I never really got along with just people who don't observe and acknowledge their health. Yeah, it was. I went to school outside of Portland, so it was really cloudy and gray and gloomy, and that definitely took a large toll on my mental health. I wasn't interested in the college scene. I didn't really socialize that much, and when I did, I was kind of underwhelmed and irritated with just the state of the world, really, and what people in my age group then chose to focus their energy on. Luckily, I was involved in the school garden, and I had a really great mentor who I would go over to her house and work in her yurt, and we talked a lot about making food, and she's an amazing chef. So we did a lot of gardening and permaculture over there, and I was lucky enough to be able to take one permaculture class, which was like my favorite class of my entire college education, and kind of inspired me to drop out and pursue that because they didn't offer any more classes in that subject. So yeah, it was difficult, and I would be, since I was the only one using the kitchen for all of my meals, it was really hard emotionally because the kitchen was always dirty. People would use my stuff and they would not put it back. They wouldn't clean it. The sink got clogged. I had to unscrew the sink and there was a knife stuck in the tube. Just like silly things that got on my nerves. And it took me a little while, but I soon realized that none of the students really knew how to cook. And when they would cook, it would be for like a dorm room event, and they would have different meal stations in each of the kitchens, and they would be making brownies in mugs in the microwave and mac and cheese and things like that. And they would comment, people would walk by the kitchen and walk in and be like, "What are you cooking? It smells so good." Something simple that I was cooking. And so that was really hard for me. The kitchen was always thrashed, and the kitchen is definitely a sacred space that I see in my mind that gives us our nourishment, and it just wasn't treated that way. So it was hard for me to realize that and just to live in that reality day after day, not having a safe space to cook my food in. It was all around a very tumultuous time for me. The weather itself was very depressing. It was gray a lot of the time. It was hard physically and emotionally. It was really hard.
Yeah. So just to clarify, most of the time when you go to college, they require you to have a meal plan, which means you're going to be eating in the cafeteria because most of the kids don't know how to cook and they want to make sure that they're fed well, quote unquote. And so you're subjected to being forced basically to eat cafeteria food, which is pretty close to hospital food or prison food, right? It's industrialized food on a large scale. So it's the cheapest food they can find. There's probably very few things that were organic. Most of the things had additives and preservatives and bad, seed oils and sugar and gluten. So if you are looking to eat something other than those sort of poisonous toxins, it's literally impossible to find that in a cafeteria at a college. So we were up against a lot of challenges because Stella does not eat that way, and she ended up being able to have access to the dorm room kitchen, which was, like you said, it was always a disaster. It was uninspiring. It was overwhelming. I mean, just all the things that came with you having to use that space. And I remember it took us about a year, maybe 6 months,
Mhm.
to actually go to the administration, fill out the paperwork, all the petitioning to actually get you a room in the dorm with a kitchen. And that was a huge step. And that was jumping through hoops for months and months and writing letters and interviews and all the things that we had to do to actually be able to get you into a different room so you could get out of that kitchen and get into your own space where you could have your things that weren't getting lost and stolen and, used and things like that. So that was a major hurdle that we overcame. By the time you got into your own kitchen, I remember you had the instant pot, you were making broths and meats and stews and things like that. You had a blender, so you were able to make smoothies. It was definitely a challenge. And like you said, with the weather combined with the social environment that was very challenging for you, thank God you had a permaculture class and a wonderful permaculture teacher, and that really set you off on your path to become a permaculturist.
So what I did when I dropped out of college is I went back to work at an organic farm that I had been working for a few years before I went to college. So I worked there for 6 years total in the field and planting plants and weeding and planting seed starts and working in the greenhouse and working farmers markets. So pretty much doing all the physical jobs on that farm. And I decided to make an offering to my community that I would help people design and build their own permaculture gardens. And I designed one for my mom and my dad at their house in Auburn here. And that garden is now um, about 6 years old now, and it's doing great. There's a couple fruit trees, there's a lot of herbs, there's strawberries, there's blueberries. It looks beautiful. It's very mature now. It's very low maintenance and all year round. It's just gorgeous and has something blooming or fruiting. And then I designed a couple more permaculture gardens for a couple more people in the community, and I got to work on their property and build the gardens, building soil and then planting plants and kind of teaching them how to maintain it and grow their permaculture garden. I would say what sets a permaculture garden away from just any other garden, is that it focuses a lot on the soil health and the soil biology. And it also focuses on really maximizing the use of all of your plants. So, you try not to plant one thing for one purpose. You try to fit it into the system and the ecosystem that you have so it has multiple purposes and uses in that system. It makes for a very abundant space and ecosystem that you can eat from and make medicine from and watch the birds eat from.
You're building a natural habitat for the natural environment to thrive in. I think that's what makes it a little bit different from a traditional organic farm. Maybe could you just tell us a little bit about the difference between permaculture and organic farming?
Yeah, so organic farming, the same idea. They still till their land. They do add organic compost. They use all organic fertilizers and pesticides. So a lot of the insect killers are things like neem oil or tea tree oil, and things that are not as harmful to our bodies as glyphosate or other pesticides like that. I would say the main difference is tilling the land. So in larger scale agriculture, even organic agriculture, they use tractors to till the soil. And after a plant has been harvested, they'll let it sit in the field and they'll till it under so that plant matter will become part of the soil again. But that tilling process, it it's if you imagine the soil ecosystem to be like a city, and every little wormhole and beetle skeleton that's degrading in the soil, all those spaces in the soil, that's the pore space of the soil. So there's space for air and water to grow, and there's space for mycelium to grow, and that is the city structure, like the living structure of the soil. And when you till that, it would be like a huge tractor just going through and tilling up your neighborhood that you live in. So that's, and it does, it works, especially if you're adding mass amounts of soil compost to your fields every year. But ultimately, you're degrading the soil, and you're degrading the life within the soil. So permaculture is very much emphasizes the fact of no tilling. You're not disrupting the underground ecosystem, and you're adding to it. You're adding mycorrhizal fungi. You're inoculating it with different bacterias and funguses that will ultimately aid in the growth of all of your plants and the decomposition of the mulch that you're putting on top. And it just keeps that circle closed and going.
When you talk about that, I sort of envision like a big backhoe coming in and digging up the street in your, like you said, in your neighborhood, and it would pull up all the plumbing, all the sewer systems, all the electrical wires, all the infrastructure would be completely destroyed. And
Yeah,
then by the time you build that back up again, and let's say somebody else wants to do something in the neighborhood and then they do it all again, it's just a lot of work for the natural habitat to keep regenerating itself in that way. And over time, it just keeps breaking down and breaking down these, like you said, the mycelium, the network that's underneath the ground that's so important for plants to grow and for things to thrive. So at our house in Northern California, which is where you live, Stella, now, we had a big lawn. It was not a giant yard, but it was all lawn. And we took out all the lawn, and now everything there is edible food. So I know there's berries and a cherry tree and lemon trees and lime trees and lots of herbs for teas and things like that, and culinary herbs. And it's just absolutely gorgeous. It's stunning. The amount of resources that we have there in a very small lot in the middle of the city is incredible. It's just absolutely incredible. So you did a beautiful job on that. And I know that you're also involved with projects all over, even the world. So you were also part of designing an eco village here in Mexico. So
Mhm.
that's really exciting. And you've done just some amazing work with your permaculture and farming skills. I'm amazed at what can happen when you just apply these simple things. So you're basically covering up, as we did with our lawn. I remember we saved all of our Amazon boxes, for a year, and just kept layering cardboard boxes and wood chips and sometimes some straw and compost into that. And it's loaded with worms. It's loaded with fungi, and it's incredible. It was quite a learning process, and I just really enjoyed it, and wonder, why we can't all recycle our Amazon boxes into our yards and make food forests. So
Yeah. Yeah. I remember about 4 or 5 years here now, my boyfriend infilled our backyard here with wood chips and For the first couple years, we couldn't really grow in it because it was all wood chips and none of it had really broken down yet. It took a couple years, but after a couple years, there was only about 2 inches left of wood chips, and the rest is just solid, rich black
Mm.
soil. And in the alleyway, which is not actually our property, but we have a very small yard. So there was some condos built across the street, and it was just kind of the gravel rubble from that construction site. And we just went ahead and started piling on wood chips. And for the first couple of years, I remember watering there, and I would stand in one spot for a minute or two, and then slowly the water would just start seeping under all the plants and into the road. And so when we'd water, that was like my timer. Like I'd water until it started seeping out. But now, years later, I can water as long as I want, and it all gets absorbed into the earth because there's that much more organic material. And what happens when you put wood chips on top of like hard clay, or just really any type of soil really that is not really conducive to growing anything in, the layers start mixing, and the soil starts building in that mixing layer, and the soil gets thicker and thicker and thicker and goes deeper into that kind of traumatized dirt, I would say, or just dirt, not soil. And as you layer and layer on more wood chips, the bottom layer keeps disintegrating and decomposing into that dirt and making soil. And then you get more and more and more soil as you keep layering. So it's been really cool to watch the evolution of that garden, and how it's just how it's grown, how the soil has grown and just gotten so much better. I think 3 years ago now, my boyfriend and I, he found some land on Zillow, and it was a southwest facing slope, so it was perfect for growing anything really. The problem that we have here in Auburn is that our yard is pretty shady, so we have a lot of trees, and I feel like the only problem up there is that there's too much sunlight. It is a little windy, but so yeah, the first thing, our whole property is sloping, so the first thing that we did was got a tractor and put in a driveway and dug in swales. So a swale is basically a ditch that's on contour of the hill. So it captures all of the moisture that runs off that hill and puts it back into the earth. So we dug 3 large swales across the entire property. And it's really cool to see. Last winter, there was a puddle in the bottom swale all winter long. Like in between rainstorms, it would just stay there because there was so much water being captured from the rest of the property that the swale on the bottom was just full of water all winter long. You can tell if you look at the hill and then go up to the level of the swale, there's grass all over the hill, but in the swale, it's just that much more green and that much more thick. And the plants there are really responding to it well. And I spread about 50 pounds of cover crop last winter and saw a lot of that come up and bloom. I spread clover, I spread Visalia, I spread poppies. There were a lot of native grasses to California, and yeah, a lot of different clovers. There was crimson clover, red clover, and then a lot of different perennial grasses. They'll be there forever, and their roots will just keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper and helping to build that soil ecology. One thing that we plan to do is also use wood chips in the swales and basically fill them with wood chips so that they can start to break down the heavy clay. So it's our whole property is pretty solid clay. And so when it does get wet, it gets very sticky, and we can't drive up our driveway because it's just super muddy. Even when you walk, it's like every step you take, there's another 4 inches of clay on the bottom of your foot. So we have a bunch of plans to kind of make walkways and treat the driveway with some lime, maybe to harden it. Yeah, so hopefully one day we'll have countless fruit trees out there and different layers of the canopy. So bigger hardwood trees and fruit trees and vines and shrubs and berries and ground cover plants. And there's a big vision there, and it's exciting to watch it unfold. Yeah, it's been a dream of mine to build my own straw bale house. I grew up in a straw bale house. That was a really inspiring phase of my life, and I didn't really realize it until we had to move out of that house and from that property. But just living in a living structure, a structure that doesn't have super impervious water membranes on the outside. So you're living in a house that doesn't have those things. So there's air that can come through the walls, and the walls heat up and they cool down, and they manage the temperature fluctuations of the inside of the house, and breathable building. And it makes a huge difference just for the life that's inside of it. I feel there's it's just a different energy that comes with a earthen home that's built with the clay from the land. And yeah, we actually got our timber from just the town below us. We got to get all of our lumber that's local ponderosa pine for our house. And yeah, it's just beautiful working with these woods. There's a couple different categories of soil types. There's sandy soil, which has a lot of sand in it, and there's clay soil, which is heavy clay, and then there's a loamy soil, which is kind of like a mix between the two. When you have solid clay, like I might even add some sand to my clay just to break up the clay and let more air through. But ultimately, when you add organic material on top of any sort of ground and you water it and maybe even plant some things, even though they might not grow as robustly as they would in a nice soil that has good pore space in it, it'll just start the process of breaking up that clay. And once the wood chips sit there for a long time, they'll start decomposing. And with the right bacterial life and fungal life, it'll break down the minerals and kind of start mixing them with the clay and making a soil. All the little kind of mosses that you see on rocks, it's an algae and a fungus working together, and they're basically eating the rock. They're eating the rock, and they survive off of those minerals. Fungi and algae were the first two plants, and then when they came together to make mosses and lichens and things like that, that was when soil started to be created, is when they started eating the minerals and taking water and sunlight. And then when they decomposed into the land, it started to create organic matter or carbon rich matter. So discovery of soil is that process that happens when a fungi and an algae come together and they start to break down the heavy minerals that are found in rock.
I know that you do a lot of plant walks, and people come and you take them out in the forest and you learn about the native wild plants. Basically, it's foraging, right? It's foraging for the native wild plants, the species that have not yet been modified by humans, either to make them bigger or last longer, or we've used GMOs and modified their actual genetic structure. That's a whole nother story, next level to industrialized food production. But even in the organic world, we see a lot of the same things. I mean, people go into the grocery store and they look at the center aisle of all the vegetables and they think they're getting all sorts of different vegetables in their diet, but they're really not, right? Can you
Right.
talk a little bit about that?
I think what you're kind of hinting at is the fact that most vegetables that we eat are either in the brassica family or the mustard family. Beets and chard are the same plant, but they've been bred just like dogs have been bred. Like if you want a small dog, then you have to breed small dogs together until you get the dog that's as small as you want it to be. So it's kind of like what we've done with chard and beets is that one plant was bred for the root and one plant was bred for the leaf. And so now we have chard and beets, which came from the same plant, but it was edible. So we decided to breed it for its genetics and to create something that's more substantial. And that's how all of our food today has come to be. My boyfriend always jokes, like, I wonder, gosh, whoever discovered the watermelon must have been so happy. And I'm just like, I don't think it happened like that. Like, nobody walked up to a watermelon the size of their head and broke it open. It was this juicy thing. The first watermelon were probably very small and very dry. And it took decades to breed something into a red, juicy, sweet watermelon. And now some of them are genetically modified so they don't even have seeds, a seedless watermelon. And that's how all of the food came to be that we eat. You can't find anything that we eat in the wild anymore.
You're not going to be on a hike and find a zucchini growing in the
No.
side of the stream or whatever. I mean, you'll find other things, but like you said, they're these wild grasses essentially that have been
Hmm.
changed over time. Like we changed wolves into Pomeranians, you know. This is what humans do to animals and food and
Yeah.
vegetables and plants, right? So it's fascinating
Yeah.
to me that we think we're getting so much variety in our diet because we have beets and chards and carrots and all this stuff on the plate, but really we're eating the same thing over and over, and that essentially over time can be really problematic for a lot of people. And that's kind of what I deal with, is people that have done that for too long and they've been poisoned by the plant poisons and toxins, and there may be a time when they have to sort of detox from that, which we used to do on a regular basis. You know, we used to be hunters and gatherers, and we would eat mostly animal products and occasionally
Right.
some food from the forest when we ran out of things or we couldn't hunt anything, or you know, it was the dead of winter or whatever, we didn't have plants, so we would detox.
Hmm. Right. We didn't always have everything. It was,
Yeah,
we had one thing this one month out of the year, and then it switched to another thing, and then it switched to another thing. We were never eating the same thing every day or every month,
right.
let alone all year round.
Let alone things that don't even grow anywhere near you.
The part about changing our food and selecting our food and, you know, selecting the genetics of our food. And then there's the part with the Industrial Revolution where the big game players decided we have all this toxic waste from war and these toxic wastes from other industrial workplaces. So not only are we eating the same things every day, but they're riddled with so many chemicals. And then just go another step further, our soil, because we use those chemicals and we're not building our soil, all of the nutrients that had been in our soil are just being washed away, into the ocean, into our water sources, down the drain. And there's not even a fraction of the minerals and nutrients and vitamins in our food that were there even 50 years ago.
Where do we get nutrients? If we're foraging in the forest, those plants that we're finding that are edible, if we're wise enough to know which ones they are, what does one eat if they're not going to be a forager in the woods? And that's where really many of the most nutrient dense plants are, the things we can find when we go out on a hike in the woods or in the desert or whatever, which is limited. But if you know what you're doing, it's a wonderful thing. And if you don't, what do you do?
Yeah, well, when you have a wild animal and you eat that animal, you are getting all pretty much all of the essential nutrients, all of the essential minerals and vitamins that we need in our bodies in order to survive, not only to be healthy, but in order to survive, in order to have a functioning immune system, in order to have the right cycles of our health, the right menstrual cycle, the right emotional cycles. You know, these all these systems are super thrown off when we don't have these micro amounts of all of the essential minerals and vitamins. um, my herbal teacher Paul Bergner, he would call them the crumbs of creation,
Hmm.
because we need them in their very small amounts, but we nonetheless we need them to survive and to be healthy. So wild animals, and not only wild animals, but just animals that have been fed what they're what they would be fed in the wild. So free ranging beef, grass fed grass fed ruminants, pigs that are allowed to roam and dig up roots and eat compost and do what they would do in a wild setting. Those animals do have all of the essential nutrients, especially in their organ meats. And then another source would be sea vegetables. Kelps and seaweeds are just chock full of zinc and iodine and manganese and copper and all of the tiny little crumbs of creation that we need to sustain healthy systems in our body. I actually had the pleasure of harvesting seaweed with a friend of mine who has a seaweed company. Just to work with these plants is incredible. They're super beautiful, and they're like animals in a lot of ways. They have different characteristics about them that you know how they choose where they grow, and how they reproduce and when they reproduce, and these different mechanisms that they have, and the control over those mechanisms really likes them to an animal more than a plant, really, in most matters. But these plants in the ocean, they, first of all, they have this salt water that they're growing in. So they're absorbing all the minerals in the salt water and kind of transforming them into a usable form for our bodies. So I got to go out and spend a couple days on the ocean harvesting seaweed, and I'm excited. I think it's a great way to get a lot of trace elements and minerals into your body. And farmers along the coast back in the day, when people, were just had small family gardens, they would bring seaweed from the ocean and put it in their farm fields. They would put it in their garden and bury it in the soil just to put those minerals back into the soil.
And they would eat it as well. I mean, the people
Mm.
that are in Japan and Taiwan and all these places where they have extremely high IQs, come to find out,
Mm.
are because they eat high amounts of sea vegetables and
Yeah.
seaweed. What particular strain of seaweed are you talking about, and what elements specifically are in that?
The three types that I got to harvest were wakame, kombu, and sea palm.
Mm.
And iodine, I would say, is the biggest mineral that is found in those plants, and the most impactful, I would say, on the human body is iodine.
And the most
And
controversial, right?
yes, the most controversial, and so many conditions that are caused from deficiencies. Everything can be rooted back to a deficiency, and it's kind of counterintuitive to think that, because never has there been a time when we've been given the availability of so much diversity and so much food and so much selection that you wouldn't think that we were under eating anything at all. It's simply the fact that the foods that we eat are so devoid of everything that we actually need in our bodies that we just deprive our systems of so many essential nutrients, and it breaks down our bodies from the bottom to the top. It's like cutting out the smallest thing in the food chain, and then everything else is affected and it's not able to function properly.
Yeah, like all the processed and packaged foods that have none of these things that we're talking about. They used to add iodine to salt, but if you're really concerned about your health, you're probably not eating that type of processed salt anyway.
Yeah.
So it's super important for all the listeners to know that you have to supplement with iodine. The human body needs iodine. And there has been,
Especially females.
yes, especially females. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
I mean, female and male bodies are very different. Most of the studies and most of the knowledge that globally we have about the human body is about the male human body, not the female human body. So all of the studies that show, the recommended daily values of all of these minerals and nutrients is according to the male body. And females are very different, and we need very different amounts of these minerals and vitamins. And so when we live our lives according to the RDA that's meant for a man, it shows up in PCOS and Hashimoto's and just so many ovarian disorders and uterine disorders, breast cancer, and all these, the tissue degeneration.
So the tissues just can't function. The organs can't function optimally. The brain can't function optimally. We can't reproduce because we're just lacking basic, vital,
Yeah.
necessary nutrients in the diet, and particularly iodine, which is quite a controversial mineral. It is one of the most controversial, maybe next to salt. And the two work together. So we are depriving ourselves of these two essential nutrients, and it's really damaging our health. And particularly women require almost double the amount of iodine as a man because our breast tissues, our lymph nodes, our uterus, our ovaries, you utilize so much more iodine than men. I think it's a fascinating discussion, and there's so much scientific literature out there. I mean, there's just study after study after study.
Our cognition, the brain uses iodine as well, and there's many different uses of iodine, many different forms of iodine that we use in the body. And there was a study done on two tribes, and one was supplemented with iodine, one was not. And they measured the IQs of the children who were born to women supplementing with iodine. And it was just night and day difference. Like the women that this doctor is working with, he describes the children as just pure genius. Like they have an intuition, they have a sense, they have self-will, they have what it takes to really be human naturally on this earth, and to kind of tell the difference between natural and unnatural, and live according to the natural laws. And then also just have a higher IQ, be able to, take care of themselves better at an earlier age, and have these developmental milestones come at expected times, instead of developing, you know, autism or ADHD or all of these developmental disorders and attention deficit disorders that we're seeing today in children. It's a huge epidemic with children today, that they're just, humans aren't the way they used to be. It's just a fact. We're not the way that we used to be. It's very evident now, and it's very extreme now, and it's kind of scary now. All of these things kind of coming together, and really crumbling what it is to be human, and how it is to live a natural human life, because our very foundational resources that it takes to do that have been taken away from us. Our food systems have been completely corrupted, and our education system and everything that we do now is so far removed from what it really is to truly be human on the earth, and what it is to eat, and how it is to live in a community, and how it is to learn from your elders, and all of that has just completely crumbled. The health of mothers birthing children is, it's crucial.
David Brownstein, Dr. Brownstein, has written many fabulous books about
Mhm.
salt and iodine, and understand that these are crucial, necessary elements for the body. And without
Yeah.
them, your health is just going to fail. The other doctor that we were mentioning was Dr. George Fletchis. He's amazing, but he's gone through volumes and volumes and volumes of research that's already been done and sort of tucked away. Nobody's talking about it. Your doctor's not going to tell you about it. And yet, the ability for women to reproduce and have babies that can think and thrive, and not have autism and ADD and ADHD and depression and anxiety as young children, that we're seeing this in now, even, is crucial for them to have iodine and salt in their diet. So, this is a fascinating topic, but ovarian cysts, polycystic ovarian syndrome, fibrocystic breast tissues, we're finding the result of lack of iodine. And it's well documented in the medical literature. But again, your doctor's probably not going to mention this to you as a woman. We're told to get mammograms, and that's about it when it comes to
Well,
breast health.
right. And along with your doctor not even mentioning it, when you do get tested, since the normal ranges are targeted at men, we always fall in the normal range. And so even if you're on the bottom of the normal range, they can't do anything. They won't even test for certain things unless there's other signs. It's so sad to see women who do have these symptoms, and who do have a hard time getting through daily life because their energy's drained, or they
Mhm.
have an intolerance to cold, or these fundamental symptoms that show up in so many women. And since they don't fit the diagnosis, even PCOS is a syndrome, it shows up different in every woman. It's hard to even get help because you don't even fall into the categories most of the time.
Doctors don't even test for iodine deficiency. You would have to get a special test at a special lab, but they're simply unaware. People are just unaware that they're deficient. And with women, especially, this is why we see Hashimoto's. I think it's 6 times more prevalent in women than men, because women require double the amount of iodine that a man does. So one, they're not getting tested. Two, they have no idea they're deficient. And it helps in so many ways, the lymph systems, the organ systems. And so we're seeing people with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, right? This is essentially a nutrient deficiency. And there's a lot of controversy around what you'll hear mainly in the medical media is that you shouldn't take iodine if you have Hashimoto's. So people are being taught to fear iodine and fear salt, And that's why we have epidemic proportions of these problems. And like you said, it's so sad. The brain cells, the glial cells actually require high levels of iodine, much more so than other organs in the body and other tissues in the body. And so if you're deficient in iodine as going into a pregnancy, your child's going to be deficient.
It's not only the health of the thyroid mostly, but there's like thyroid hormone receptors in every cell in our body. They're in our brain, they're in our every organ, and every single cell in our body there's a thyroid hormone receptor. And that, among other things, helps regulate our body temperature, but our ability to sweat, our ability to control our body's temperature, and so many other things.
What other things do you find are things you do on a daily basis that help you to feel your very best?
Drinking mineral water, for one, adding minerals to my water, magnesium, manganese, a little bit of iodine, but all these trace elements that we don't have in our diet anymore. I put them in my water and I drink them.
Do you also add salt to your water?
I do. I do add salt to my water, especially when it gets hot and I'm sweating a lot. I do drink a lot of salt water. And then mostly just eating in season. I work at the farmer's market and I have for about 7 years. And even if you don't work at a farmer's market, there's a lot of farmer's markets around and the prices are pretty comparable to what you'd find in a grocery store, and you're supporting your local farmer who is more often than not kind of struggling to get by, and farming is not a very profitable thing. So, to be a farmer is what my herbalist friends and I say, it's the Lord's work. Somebody's got to do it. But yeah, it's a very humble thing to do. And they do need our support in order to keep farming good food.
Our local farmers, that's our lifeline. Our lifeline is how close are we to touching a farmer that's actually working in the dirt, working with the animals, and doing these natural farming techniques that we've been talking about: organic farming, permaculture farming, free range raising animals in their natural habitat. The humans that have connection with local farmers are the ones that are going to make it to the next generation. And back to the iodine concept and the brain function, we are going to have more people that can't take care of themselves very soon than we do people that can, because we're going to have Alzheimer's and dementia from the elderly, and also autism and all the other debilitating mental illnesses that people have because they're not getting the nutrients from the animal fats, the animal proteins that they need in their brain.
Yes, thank you. Shout out to the farmers.
Yeah, big
Yeah,
shout out to the farmers.
they're important. So yeah, eating seasonally is big for me. Eating local beef that's grass fed. I've been starting to incorporate some organ meats into my diet. I'll get some beef liver and just kind of mix it in with meals, like a little portions. It's not like eating a liver. This is reflected in the way that we treat our domesticated animals, like our dogs and cats, because dogs get sick all the time. They get, their bone density drops and they break bones and their hips go out and they get tumors, they get cancer. It's very common in dogs. And, we look at what we're feeding our dogs and it's things that they've never eaten in their history. It's grains, peas and beans and, a lot of filler carbohydrates along with, maybe a little bit of salmon or a little bit of chicken or, maybe some lamb, but most of the majority of it is supplemented nutrition and carbohydrates. And it's reflected a lot in how we feed ourselves. Eating animal fat, eating animal meat, animal protein. I render my own tallow. I make my own ghee. I get milk from a friend of mine who milks her goats, and I help her in her garden. So just being close to the environments that you're getting your food from, asking yourself, is this an environment that I like? Would I want to spend a couple days here or my whole life here? Is this conducive to health? Working on the farm was amazing. It was beautiful. Every day was beautiful. Waking up with the sunrise every morning and listening to the birds sing and listening to the roosters across the street and watching the hawks overhead and the dewdrops on all the kale leaves and, finding frogs and finding bugs, just everything about it was breathtaking. It was beautiful. And that's what it should be like. It shouldn't be sterile. It shouldn't be necessary to wear a hazmat suit when you're spraying things on your plants. It shouldn't be dangerous. It shouldn't be all of those things. It should be beautiful and natural and inviting. So that's kind of how I figure out where I'm going to get my food from. And I do eat out. I eat out on occasion, but for the most part, it's seasonal vegetables grown in beautiful places from passionate people who are wanting to make a better future for their children and who are interested in nourishment and living close to the land. I make a tallow body butter and I use that every time I get out of the shower. Oiling your body is a great way to just kind of relax your nervous system, to check out your body, like see if there's any new spots on your body or any ticks anywhere, just to check yourself out. Like, not a lot of humans, I feel like, really touch themselves or know the shape of their body. So I like to do that after showers or after I go in the river to moisturize my skin. And that's another way that we can get nutrients into our skin, or chemicals, depending on what we use on our skin. But our skin absorbs a lot, and plants take up things through their roots, like we eat things through our mouths, but they also absorb things through their leaves. You can fertilize plants with a technique called foliar feeding. So you basically spray like a compost tea or a kelp tea, or you could mix bat guano with water and spray it on physically onto the plant, and it will absorb the nutrients through the leaves. And that's kind of what we do. We absorb everything on our skin. Everything that touches our skin is absorbed into our bloodstream. So if we can use healthy saturated grass-fed beef fat on our skin, that's going to help our whole body. So I do that. I drink tea. I try to cook with a lot of herbs to make my food more warming and more digestible. There's a lot of things that I do on a daily basis that help me stay in this path, sitting in the sun, relaxing, taking time to do nothing, read a book. There's so many things that are rejuvenating to us that we've lost touch of now in today's society.
Absolutely. So true. We're so far removed from nature. It's killing us.
Hmm.
You mentioned the beef tallow body butter. I use just plain old beef tallow on my body when I moisturize. So I can't wait to get your new body butter, Stella. But I also make, this is just so easy. This is
Yeah,
this is 100% beef tallow for my lips. It's amazing, incredible, so simple. We've gotten so overcomplicated. All we need to
yeah,
do is walk out and get in the sunlight, make a simple meal. And we've just completely overcomplicated life, I feel
yeah,
like, today. And you are truly a living example, Stella, of simplifying and living close to the land and the earth, and really honoring the cycles of your body and the seasons. And all of that is so crucial. It's so, so important for our mental health as well. I just want to honor the fact that you recognized, even being going to college up in Portland was so devastating, just because the lack of sunlight and the clouds and the weather. And how many people are living in that environment every single day in and day out. And we wonder why people are so depressed and anxious and can't function and can't get out of bed and don't have the energy. They just don't have the resources to rejuvenate their cellular network that we need. And that it is all based on how closely we are living to the earth, actually touching the earth, being in the sunlight, exposed to the elements. And we have overprotected ourselves, overprotected our bodies in little houses behind picket fences and in our rooms with our forced air and cooling and perfect temperature environment. We don't sweat. We don't have to walk anywhere because we drive our cars. I mean, we've really over domesticated ourselves, and we are paying the price. Again, I just want to emphasize how awesome it is that you are living your life in this way. And it is a breath of fresh air to see a young person who understands the importance of living a lifestyle that supports our human design, really. So thank you for being such an incredible teacher for me.
there's a lot of kind of guidelines or mental little tag notes that I will say to myself or kind of live by. But one of them that's simple and easy is just asking yourself, before you eat anything, before you do anything, before you put anything on your skin, just asking how many steps did it take from the earth before it got to you. So the least amount of steps possible is best. And if you can grow it in your garden, if you can raise it on your property, it's probably good. And if you can't, it's probably bad. And that's kind of general, like, if you can do it yourself, it's okay. But if you need a commercial plant to process whatever you need, it's not okay. It's not okay. There's a disconnection. Like, the further it gets from the earth is the more harmful it's going to be for your body. Like,
Right.
for instance, mining minerals, or, even refining anything, processing anything in any way is going to remove it from its natural state and make it more harmful for your body.
Great tip. And it's so true. If you look at just one great example of that is seed oils. People think that they're doing such a good deed for their body by not eating animal fats anymore, because we've been totally brainwashed to believe that animal fats are bad for us. And really, we evolved for millions and millions of years on animal fats. Millions. And then it was in the last maybe 100 years that we introduced the factory processed seed oil from a plant that was supposed to be such a better alternative because it would lower our cholesterol and our LDLs. And it did. It did a wonderful job of lowering our LDLs. And it also did a wonderful job of creating a huge
Inflammation epidemic.
yeah, I mean, we're just riddled with inflammation as a result of it. We're eating oxidized seed oils that have been sitting on a shelf and came from a factory. And that's what we're trying to use to build our brains and our nervous system. No wonder there's an epidemic problem with neurodegenerative diseases, MS and Alzheimer's, dementia, brain fog. All of these things are skyrocketing. And not to mention obesity and metabolic syndrome and everything else. These things require the building block, the basic building block that animals have that they can give us. And we are animals too. So we're not made out of plant material, and we never will be. And to repair our bodies, we have to have the same structured material, the same elements that can only come from animals. Unfortunately, unfortunately for everybody who thinks that not eating animals is going to save the planet's going to save itself. The planet's going to be just fine as soon as all the humans are gone. We just have to get our own brains intact so that we can think, so that we can really look at how we can live a better life and make the world a better place. But we can't even do that because we're so compromised. So the seed oil discussion is just really up for me because it's so obvious that in the last 100 years, when we've seen this monumental decline in health, that seed oils were a major part of this. And they're highly toxic, they're highly oxidative, they destroy our cells, and we are relying on them to build our brains and our nervous system, and it's killing us.
And it's another example of a byproduct. Seed oils were a byproduct, and they weren't used for anything. And there were thousands and thousands and tons of gallons of seed oils. And someone had the bright idea to deodorize them, for one, because they smelt so bad because they're so rancid, and then heat them to incredible heats to kill all the bacteria that was growing in them, and then feed them to humans. But
Right.
It's a byproduct. It's like the mass scale of agriculture is so big that when there is a byproduct, it's like, why not turn it into something we can sell? Because there's so much of it. The foods that we eat are actually byproducts of other foods that we eat. And they have to go through, again, just incredible amounts of processing and refining to get to our bodies, which is just destroying us.
Right. If it came from a factory and it needed to be refined, it's probably something you don't want in your body. For example, you can make ghee in your kitchen. Ghee came right from the cow. You got the butter, you boiled it, you did that on your stove. The tallow came right from the animal fat. You rendered it down. There's no factory needed, right? And this all started when we had an excess of cottonseed oil for lamps, right? And then PG&E invented electricity, and we had a glut of cottonseed oil on the market, and cleverly decided to repurpose that into Crisco oil. And that's where Crisco oil came from. So we've been eating processed seed oils ever since. And that's been about the last 100 years. And MCT oil is another great example of a rancid, toxic, awful, unstable oil that can be used for a fuel for the body, but it also destroys the gut and the brain. And it's fascinating to me that we've come to the point where marketing is now the drive for what we choose to put in our bodies.
Mhm.
How good or how well somebody has marketed a product. You know, Crisco oil did a great job of destroying our health.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know anybody who today who would still use that. Maybe our our grandmother, she still uses Crisco. These things die hard, and there's it's still going strong. So MCT, Crisco, all of the refined seed oils that you see on the market are toxic. I just leave it at that. The only way to get vegetable oil out of a plant is either to cold press it as you could in the field with a cold press in an olive orchard, which can be done without a factory, and coconut oil, right? So those are two of the plant oils that aren't nearly as toxic as any of those other liquid seed oils that you'll find in bottles in the store. So if it came from a bottle in the store, don't buy it, don't eat it, don't chance it. It's definitely going to help you in the long run to avoid anything that's processed. And that doesn't even get into the processed food discussion, but that'll be for another day. So I really appreciate you bringing up the point that you did, Stella, to share with people that the further something comes from the earth, the more steps it has to go through before it reaches your mouth or your skin. That's the thing to be mindful of. How many steps did it take? How many additives got put into this product before I'm putting it on my skin? And you might be surprised that there's 50 ingredients in a lot of these skincare products, maybe 100, and fragrances and chemicals and stabilizers and emulsifiers and all these things, even in the foods that we eat. So we are really having to guide ourselves with our intuition around our food choices, because nobody's going to do it for you. And if you leave it up to the media, you're going to be led astray. Thank you so much, Stella, for being on the show today. I so love just everything that you shared, and I'm so happy for you to be thriving and enjoying your life so much and just being such a shining example of beauty and vibrancy in the world. So thank you so much for shining your bright light on everybody you touch and are in the presence of. It's lovely to see a young person who's just so amazing. So thank you for being so
Well,
amazing.
thank you for leading me this way, Mom. Very grateful for you.
I love you.
Love you too.
Okay, dear. Have a wonderful day, and thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
You can find me at ketogenicdietcoach.com, where you can find out more about my program called Radical Health Makeover. This will help you get keto adapted so you can live your life more fully. This is a 1-year mastery course that includes private coaching sessions with me that you can actually start today. You are not a victim of your genetic code. If you're looking to reverse symptoms of leaky gut, chronic inflammatory conditions, autoimmunity, cancer, or if you just want to maximize your athletic performance or age more gracefully, training your metabolism to burn fat for fuel instead of just carbohydrates is a powerful strategy. I encourage you to pick up a copy of my book, Radical Health Makeover: The Science and Spirituality of Self-Healing, which will give you a solid foundation for taking control of your health. In it, I've outlined specific strategies that you must take with your diet, as well as important daily practices that will help you to leverage the power of your mind in your healing process. You'll also find my free ebook that you can download called How to Start a Keto Diet the Right Way: The 3 Must-Do Steps for Success, along with my free 5-day keto challenge that will teach you everything you need to know about tracking your progress. This is crucial for being successful with a keto diet. You have to learn how to track your biometrics, and so that you can learn the language of your body. I know this sounds daunting, but I will walk you through this whole process and I will simplify it for you and help you to avoid the common pitfalls and problems that I see so often that people are making that's really derailing them from having success. I don't want that to happen to you. So do reach out to me on my website. You can send me a message and let me know how I can support you on your keto journey.